This is the Galaxy S25, and I'm gonna be really honest, save your money and get the Galaxy S24 because this phone makes no sense at all. They've changed almost nothing compared to the S24, which was pretty similar to the S23, which was also pretty similar to the S22. The one thing that has changed with this phone compared to the Galaxy S24 realistically doesn't make a major difference, but at the same time makes this phone a terrible value. Before I start, I'm not trying to unnecessarily hate on Samsung here, but at this point it's been 4 years since the base S series has gotten any meaningful hardware upgrades. Samsung at this point is just recycling the same phone on and on. Yeah, the design looks slightly different, but the underlying hardware has been the same for generations now. But first, there are some good things with this phone, like the design. I really love the way this phone feels in the hand. It is very light, very comfortable, and this has to be one of the thinnest and smallest high-end phones out there. Compared to the Galaxy S24, it's not drastically thin or light, and it's actually hard to notice those improvements. But the in-hand feel of the S24 was really good, and I'm glad that they carried that over to the S25. It is also built really well despite being thin and light. The basics are mostly solid. It has great speakers, the usual IP68 rating, solid haptics, wireless charging and reverse wireless charging with Qi 2.1 support, which is a version of Qi 2 without those magnetic rings, aka MagSafe. Nice. Technically, this phone does support MagSafe, but you need to buy third-party cases to take advantage of it. Samsung, what is the point of claiming your phone supports Qi 2.1 when you don't even have the best feature of Qi 2? I really hope they integrate MagSafe rings inside the phone next year. Okay, I've ignored something for a while. Let's talk about those camera rings. In my opinion, these look ugly in real life compared to the S24. And this feels like a last minute thing Samsung added to differentiate the S24 and S25. There's a slight gap between the glass back and the modules, which will surely be a dust magnet. I bet Samsung just went to AliExpress, ordered these camera rings for the S24 in bulk and put them on the phone. How do I know? Well, someone I know did it to their S24 and it looks exactly like the S25. Wow. Apart from that, I really like how the bezels on this phone are almost non-existent and symmetrical, not drastically different from the S24, and to be honest, that phone also had pretty thin bezels, but I daily drive an iPhone 13 Pro, and the moment I put it next to the S25, I was like, damn. I'll talk about the display later, but let's talk about the one thing that's changed with this phone, the performance. The 8 Elite is an insane chip. It is the first time in 8 years where an Android phone is faster than the most recent iPhone in benchmarks. In fact, the 8 Elite for Galaxy in this phone benchmarks higher than my M1 MacBook Pro. Yikes. But the S25 is currently the smallest phone with the 8 Elite. Does it make a difference in the real world? I will get to that part in a few burning minutes. But one thing to take away from all of these benchmark numbers is that this phone will most likely age well down the line. Having all that performance headroom is great when you consider that Samsung's gonna give this phone 7 years of updates. Speaking of which, let's talk about One UI 7. This is the biggest overhaul Samsung has given to its Android skin in years, and they've changed everything about it. First of all, it is buttery smooth, from opening apps to navigating around the interface or interacting with the Now bar. And it is as good as the iPhone in this regard. Not fully there, but they're really close. It is also visually refined and beautiful. But at the same time, it still has the best parts about Samsung's skin. It's very simple while being extremely customizable. There are some visual inconsistencies here and there, but I hope Samsung fixes them in the coming months. But Samsung didn't stop there. There's of course Galaxy AI. And Samsung has improved on top of what they already had last year. The first great thing is that 90% of these features now work on device and offline, which is a huge step up over the first gen Galaxy AI, which couldn't do anything without an internet connection. But Samsung has added a few nice things this year. For example, I really like how the phone understands what you're searching for in a natural tone. Let's say I'm searching for a cat wearing a green collar. Hello Ice Universe. Or let's say I want to know how can I make the screen dark. This is how AI should be implemented on phones. AI. But at the same time, there are some useless things. Samsung and Google hyped up Gemini a lot in the keynote, but it's honestly not that great. For example, one of the highlights was that it could do tasks within specific apps, and yeah, sure it does, but your commands have to be very specific for it to do things within apps. For example, I could tell it to play music and it would completely refuse to do it unless I specify YouTube Music or Spotify. Meanwhile, Google Assistant does it without any hiccups and also knows my preferred music streaming service is Apple Music. There are so many things like this where Google Assistant can do the task but Gemini can't. Wait, do you think a sub to this channel would be great?
Absolutely. Sankew is amazing.
Go do it. But there's also another AI feature that's useless. Now brief. The idea behind this is that it should show personalized content throughout the day based on the time or location. But all I really get in these briefs are weather and my calendar events, which I can already see on my home screen, so why should I open this? And one day it decided to randomly give me travel tips to the UAE, when I literally live in the UAE.
Wow.
You know what? Let's start talking about why I specifically hate this phone. It's because the real standout changes with this phone, which are One UI 7 and the new Galaxy AI, are just software. And both of them are most definitely coming to the S24, S23 and the S22 in a few weeks. Apart from software, the Galaxy S25 is literally the Galaxy S24 with a new chip. That's it. Now I know no one's upgrading every single year, but this could have been the year a Galaxy S22 or S23 user could upgrade. But they're gonna have the exact same experience as the S25 in a few weeks, so what's the point? Now yes, this phone feels fast, but that's because of One UI 7, not the 8 Elite. The One UI 7 beta ran just as fast and smooth on the S24. And remember how I said I'll talk about the real world experience of the 8 Elite? Well, it basically makes no difference in day-to-day tasks compared to the S24. And this is the Exynos version of the S24. Forget that. According to benchmarks, the 8 Gen 2 on the S23 Ultra is roughly 2 times slower than the Galaxy S25's 8 Elite. But I can't tell a difference between these phones in day-to-day tasks. I'm not trying to say the 8 Elite is a bad chip. You can definitely push it to its limits with some apps or games. But here's the worst part. The 8 Elite overheats pretty quickly with this phone. And it happens with the most basic tasks. I was outside using this phone and the climate is not even hot. And this phone started overheating and dipped its brightness to half in like 5 minutes. What? I don't think the base S25 was designed with the 8 Elite in mind. But here's a hot take. Samsung should have not given this phone the 8 Elite. And I'm not saying this because it overheats. It's because the 8 Elite is expensive. You see, as impressive as the 8 Elite is, it is rumored to be the most expensive Qualcomm chip. About $240 per phone. Now Samsung would have probably gotten the cost of the chip down to $190 since they sell a lot of phones. But that wouldn't still help Samsung since the bill of materials for their phones have roughly been 35 to 40% of the cost of the phone. Now if this phone sells for $800, that would mean that the bill of materials for this phone would be around $280. And I'm willing to bet that 60% of the cost would just be the 8 Elite. Let's be real. A better camera system or a bigger battery would have made a lot of difference compared to a 30% faster chip. Smartphone performance, especially with flagships, peaked at around 2021 to 2023. You don't realistically need more than what a 2023 flagship can do for 95% of the tasks out there. Heck, my main phone is an iPhone 13 Pro from 2021. It does everything I need a phone to do. I think you get my idea. The base S25 could have gotten last year's Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or even Samsung's own Exynos chips, which yes, I know a lot of people hate, but either of those options would have allowed Samsung to upgrade the other things with this phone. But let's talk about the things that needed an upgrade, like the display. Don't get me wrong, this is still a very good display. It's a 6.2-inch 120Hz display with 2600 nits of peak brightness. It is the same display as the S24. Samsung also finally fixed HDR video playback with their phones. It doesn't limit peak brightness for HDR content based on your ambient conditions. But there's another issue that's related to HDR which I'll get to in a minute. But Samsung missed something here. Why didn't they give that amazing anti-reflective coating from the S24 Ultra to the base S25 and S25 Plus? The S25 Ultra now has an improved version of what the S24 Ultra had. So why not give what the S24 Ultra had to the base models? Speaking of HDR, why does the S25 still have an 8-bit display? Not gonna lie, I started a huge controversy on Twitter because of this topic. But basically, the phone can't display a range of colors for HDR content. So you will notice banding when you watch HDR content. The only reason why I brought this whole topic up is because Samsung is now shooting HDR videos by default. So why are their phones not really fully capable of displaying those HDR videos from the phone? Speaking of which, let's talk about the cameras because they should have realistically gotten an upgrade. And yes, I'm shooting this on the S25. On the face of it, Samsung hasn't changed the camera hardware on their base model since the S22 from 2022. To be fair, hardware isn't really the full story. And Samsung claims that they've improved the software with this phone. But at this point, the camera hardware is starting to show its age. And how much can they really fix old hardware with software? On this $700 to $800 price range, Samsung has the weakest hardware on their phones. On isolation, this camera performs fine. It has good dynamic range, the photos are very contrasty, it has good color science, it packs a lot of detail, and the 3 cameras are consistent at daylight. But at low light, the phone performs terribly. The ultra wide is noisy, the main sensor is fine, and the telephoto might as well not exist. I could zoom in with the main sensor and I would get a better result compared to the telephoto. But you know what? Let's compare it to the S24. It performs identically to the S24. It's very hard to nitpick the differences between them in daylight or low light. It's the same case for portraits. They are very similar. It's just that the color science is better on the S25 and you can achieve the same color science by editing the photo. Selfies are slightly slightly better and natural on the S25. Video from the rear cameras at daylight are pretty similar between the S24 and S25. I honestly can't tell a difference. But at low light, the S25 is way better than the S24. Front video is very similar, but both have got my skin tones wrong. The S24 is a bit yellow and the S25 is very dull. Low light video seems to be way better on the S25. Like, it's not a noisy mess like the S24. One of the biggest highlights this year is that the S25 can shoot 10-bit log video, and it's actually pretty good. You can also instantly color grade the footage from the phone, which is also good. But you know what's funny? This is coming to the S24s as well, so what's the point? Finally, let's talk about battery life. It's mediocre. I got 5 to 6 hours of battery life with this phone, which might sound fine because it's a small phone. But this phone has an efficient LTPO display and efficient chip. Why is the battery life similar to the S23 and S24? In fact, there were situations where I couldn't finish a day with a single charge even when I barely used the phone. It drains a lot of battery when it's idle for some reason. The battery capacity is the same as last year. But remember how Samsung made the phone thinner? Well, they should have given this phone a bigger battery instead of making it thinner, to be honest. Charging speeds are fine. It can go up to 25 watts wired and 15 watts wireless. Not the fastest out there, but it does the job. And here's my overall verdict on this phone. 95% of the people looking at this phone should just get the S24 at a discount. It honestly makes no sense to get the S25 for $800 or even when it gets cheaper, because the S24 will also get even cheaper, to be honest. You can already get the S24 for $400 or $500. Why bother with the S25? You're gonna have the exact same experience as the S25 once the S24 gets One UI 7. The S24 is still gonna get updates for 6 more years, so you're covered in that aspect too. I honestly can't find a single reason to recommend the Galaxy S25. Please save your money and get the Galaxy S24 if you want a compact Android flagship. Or if you don't care about its compact size, get the Galaxy S23 Ultra or S24 Ultra. They go for a similar price to the S25 and they are miles better than the S25 in terms of cameras or battery life. And watch this video to see why the S23 Ultra is still great in 2025.